Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome back. This is our 8th event in the second series of webinars. And these webinars are co-hosted by the Department of Buildings and ASHRAE New York City. All our upcoming events are posted to ashraeny.org. And from my experience, it's the easiest way to view the schedule is from the calendar view. But we also have a slide with the upcoming events, I believe, at the end of the presentation, and you will be able to take a screenshot or take a picture. And the next webinar is planned for this upcoming Friday, March 28th, from 11 to 1 p.m. And the DOB will present on combined reports that time. And today's webinar will last approximately 1 hour. The video recording will be available for future viewing on both ASHRAE and DOB websites. And also you can access all previous recordings from those websites as well. And today's presentation is also available in the handouts section. If you go to the control panel in the webinar, you should be able to see it probably at the bottom of your screen, but this may be somewhere else, so it depends on your device. Just a few more housekeeping items for today's event. Everyone, as always, except for the speakers, is in listening mode only. However, we would like to encourage everyone to ask questions in the chat window, and it's on the same control panel. You can see it as chat or questions, and it's again, it depends on your device. During the webinar, the DOB team will be answering questions, and additionally, if time permits, we may also be able to conduct a brief Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So please use the chat, ask questions, and if for any reason the chat option doesn't work for you, feel free to email your questions directly to the email addresses, which we will post in a moment in the chat. One of them is ghg.emissions@buildings.nyc.gov, and this email can be utilized for general questions. And another email for BIM-related questions would be LL97, BIM _LL97 @buildings.nyc.gov. So again, it's BIM _LL97 @buildings.nyc.gov, and they should be posted in the chat in a moment. So finally, please allow me to introduce our speakers. And today I would like to welcome Emily Hoffman, Beth Golub, and Julia Fredenburg, all with the Department of Buildings. And also we have Lisa Grayson and Andrew Chintz with New York City Accelerator. So again, welcome everyone, and I'm going to pass it over now to Beth. Hello, Beth, how are you?
Hi, Luke, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Beth Golub, the Director of Policy and Legal Affairs at the Sustainability Bureau at DOB. You'll hear from me today, as well as my colleagues Emily and Julia, about the 320.7 adjustment program, and then we will pass it over to our partners at the New York City Accelerator to talk about engaging with the Accelerator on this program. Okay, great. Next slide, please. So this is the timeline that we've reviewed at each of these webinars, and it's foundational to everything that's happening right now, so we'll go over it again. Local Law 97 compliance reports are being accepted now. The deadline is May 1st with a grace period until June 30th. Additionally, for Local Law 97, there's an opportunity for building owners to apply for an extension to move that deadline to August 29th. DOB released a service notice earlier this month confirming that there are no prerequisites for a building owner to receive that extension. A building owner must simply apply. And that extension would also cover the 320.7 application, which would track the Local Law 97 deadline. Whatever the Local Law 97 deadline is, applies to the 320.7 adjustment application as well. Additionally, if a building is subject to Local Law 88 this year, in addition to Local Law 97, those compliance submissions share a deadline. So if a building receives an extension under Local Law 97, that would apply to Local Law 88 as well. However, if a building is subject to Local Law 88 this year, but not subject to Local Law 97 this year, the deadline is May 1st with the 60-day grace period to June 30th. And as a reminder, Local Law 84, the benchmarking reports are due May 1st. Okay, next slide. So we're going to go through the step-by-step process for filing a 320.7 adjustment application, including the filing fee payment. But just as a reminder, this process requires engaging in 3 different platforms and it also requires sharing information in each platform that allows the data from each platform to connect. So a submission begins in DOB Now with the payment of the filing fee. At that point, the submitter provides contact information for an owner and an owner's representative. The owner's representative could be a property management company. It could also be a service provider, which would be our sustainability professionals, our registered design professionals, retro commissioning agents, and the colleagues that work with them at those organizations. So upon paying the filing fee and providing those 3 email addresses, a building receives a payment confirmation number that can be used in Beam to submit compliance materials. Those same email addresses need to be used when providing to set up the account in Beam, and one of those emails needs to be associated with the property data administrator in ESPM. This allows energy use data and filing fee payment data to be pulled into the Beam account that's set up for the compliance for this building. I'll also take this opportunity to say we've been watching the questions throughout these webinars, and we've been doing our best to answer those questions and be responsive. And at the end of the webinar series, we will publish an FAQ that covers the most frequently asked questions. Okay, next slide. So the 320.7 adjustment it's in the law, in Local Law 97, in the Administrative Code at section 28320.7. And what this does is it provides a pathway for owners to receive a time-limited and individual case-by-case adjustment to their emissions limit when they face an external or financial constraint. So an external constraint can be a legal or physical constraint. So it might be imposed by another provision of law that the building has to comply with, or a physical constraint, and we'll get to what those might look like. This adjustment would be valid for up to 3 years, at which point, if the constraint persists, the building would need to apply again. And the emissions limit would be proposed by the registered design professional, as we're going to describe in this presentation. Then for the financial constraint, these constraints might be that, that the building can demonstrate that it meets an established metric, which represents industry best practices, or the building is on the Department of Finance's annual tax lien sale list. This pathway would be available for up to 1 year, at which point, if the constraint persists, the building would have to apply again. And the adjusted emissions limit would be the building's actual emissions for that year. We'll note that Rule 103.12 is the corresponding rule for this program, and so that rule does describe specific submission requirements. Okay, next slide. So we want to just highlight that there is a guide available that is a collaboration between the Department of Buildings and the New York City Accelerator, describing the requirements and application submission materials for the 320.7 adjustment application. I am seeing here that the link at the bottom of the screen is to the Accelerator's website, and so hopefully someone from DOB can put the link to DOB's website in the chat. The guide is the same. And so just to note that this guide reflects everything that we are going to cover here today and contains more detail about what's required in the application documentation. Okay, next slide. So generally, to demonstrate eligibility for a 320.7 adjustment, an owner is required to engage with the accelerator. This engagement is part of what needs to be demonstrated in the application materials. An owner also has to verify that the building existed when Local Law 97 was enacted, so on or before November 15th of 2019. The building has submitted their annual emissions report for the year for which the building is applying for the adjustment. The building is required to purchase, the building is required to purchase the maximum number of offsets that are allowable under the law. The Department of Buildings has published a rule describing what offsets are eligible. There's a webinar upcoming on offsets, and we'll get more into that. But the maximum number of allowable offsets would be 10% of the building's emissions limits, and that's in the law that a building has to have done that to qualify for this adjustment. Additionally, the building will have to show that it qualifies either by having a registered design professional demonstrate the external constraint, or having a certified public accountant demonstrate the financial constraint, or demonstrating that the building is on DOF's tax lien sale list. So if a building owner does the appropriate engagement with the accelerator and can demonstrate all of these other qualifying circumstances, then the owner and the accelerator will complete an adjustment process attestation form. And all of these materials will be submitted in BEAM in the building's 320.7 adjustment application. And again, the deadline for that application is the same as that building's deadline for the Local Law 97 filing for the annual emissions report or compliance report. One other thing to note is that the financial constraint adjustment is available to Article 321 buildings. Those requirements are slightly different. We'll get into that in a bit. Okay, next slide. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Emily to speak about the external constraint adjustment.
Thank you, Beth. So I'm going to get into the details of the 320.7 external constraint adjustment and what you need to, the type of supporting documentation you need and what you need to file for this report in BEAM. Like Beth mentioned, this external constraint adjustment is available for 3 years, and it is, it's intended to be used for buildings that either have another provision of law or have a physical constraint that prevents them from decarbonizing. even though they are doing everything as much as possible and demonstrating that they've also achieved, additional energy savings and emission reductions. So we're going to talk about what that means. Next slide, please. So far we've identified 3 acceptable external constraints for the purpose of this adjustment. The first one is related to industrial and manufacturing, or I&M, properties. We previously did a webinar on specifically, how these properties would apply for a 320.7 adjustment. And we have an example on what that would be, but basically it's, these properties meet the requirement of external constraints because of the type of equipment, the process equipment that is needed to create and manufacture, the goods that they're producing. That is often very hard to decarbonize. There's not other technologies available. Next is the second, type of property that we've identified as eligible for this, that may be eligible for this external constraint adjustment, are hospitals that are subject to certain health and safety regulations. They're required to do certain things because of other health and safety regulations that require them to use their equipment and operate their buildings in a certain way that make it not feasible to decarbonize. And then third is certain landmark buildings. I should note that this will not apply to the majority of New York City landmark buildings. We have had conversations with LPC, the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and they have indicated that LPC does not prevent buildings from applying energy efficiency measures and decarbonizing, however, in very certain rare cases. And so in those cases, you would have had to go to LPC and get a denial related to, this provision in your building after showing that you've done everything else you can to reduce emissions. And that denial letter would allow you to apply for this external constraint. So we only see this being used in landmark buildings in a very limited circumstance. Next slide, please. So, we're going to talk about I&M buildings since, that's the bulk of the properties that we've identified so far that can apply for this adjustment. And again, what I mentioned before is they're considered to have this external constraint when I&M buildings feature these specialized equipment processes that can't be decarbonized using available technology. These eligible buildings are generally in one of the following 3 categories that you see on the screen. So they have a building code occupancy group classified as either factory or high hazard, F or H in the New York City Building Code. Their business is classified as manufacturing in the NAICS sectors, 31, 32, or 33. And then in Energy Star Portfolio Manager, they've listed the property type as manufacturing/industrial. So generally the emissions that are considered the external constraint emissions are, fall in line with the definition of a process load or process energy that's defined in ASHRAE or the Energy Code. And, to keep in mind that this is, specific process loads related to industrial and manufacturing processes, not just generally, in other types of buildings. So the process, another way that, for I&M buildings, another way that the process energy could be measured is in the New York State Tax Bulletin. We'll have all of these linked when we post this presentation on our website. They describe how, the methodology to claim a sales tax exemption for these type of properties, and that can be helpful in applying for this adjustment. When it applies to this specific type of state tax exemption. Next slide, please. So here's just an example of what, Beth mentioned that for this external constraint, the RDP is required to propose the adjusted limit. And, in high level, that proposed adjusted limit is the unadjusted limit from Local Law 97, from the law or from the rules, plus the addition of the emissions directly attributable to the external constraint. So in this example that I'll walk you through, the emissions directly associated with that I&M process load would be the additional emissions that you apply, to get this adjustment. So I'll walk through this. So for this example, we have an I&M, say we have an industrial manufacturing building where their emissions are 2,500 tons of carbon. However, their emissions limit by law and rule is only 150 tons of carbon. So they have a very enormous penalty, and this is pretty typical for I&M buildings. So this particular I&M building, say they went and they received a prior adjustment, a 320.8 adjustment, which took their 2018 calendar emissions and adjusted it, 70% times that emissions to give them an adjusted limit of 1,800 tons of carbon. So they're still over the emission limit, and so they're deciding to, their strategy is to apply for this 320.7 adjustment. So they would, to apply for this adjustment, they break that number down further and they take their total emissions of 2,500 and, identify that 2,400 tons of emissions are attributed directly to the external constraint, which is the process loads, and 100 tons of carbon is attributable to the non-process loads. That 100 ton is less than the 150 ton limit. So, that portion of the application would look like compliance. So the RDP proposes that the adjusted limit is that 2,400 tons of carbon, which is the process load, plus the unadjusted limit, which is 150, which gives a total proposed adjusted limit of 2,550 tons of carbon. As long as all the supporting documentation was there, then DOB would review and approve this particular limit. And note that for this particular building in this example, they actually were, got two adjusted limits, one for 320.8 and 320.7. Note that you can choose either or, the more favorable one for your building, and they're not added together, they don't stack or anything like that. So hopefully that's clear. Next slide, please. So that's proposing the limit, and then I'm going to walk through what the supporting documentation looks like that needs to be submitted for each one of these applications. These requirements are outlined in Rule 103-12 that Beth mentioned. And so in the rule, there's required a detailed description of the legal provision or physical condition creating the constraint. So you need to describe either that provision of law that defines, what this external constraint is, or in the example of I&M, the physical condition would be the specific equipment that, is preventing decarbonization. Next, we need a technical explanation of how that provision described above makes it not reasonably possible to comply with the established emission limit in the law. And then next, we need to show a plan. You need to show a plan for decarbonization. So it lists, that plan in the first year. In this compliance year in 2025, it's much less detailed than it will be in future years. So we're going to walk through what this 320.7 external constraint decarbonization plan looks like for 2025 application, and then starting in 2026 reporting year, it'll be much more in line with the decarb plan in the Good Faith Efforts pathway. Next slide, please. So the next few slides are details on what this plan for decarbonization looks like, and this would be included in your supporting documentation. So the first category is documenting any progress that the building has made in reducing emissions since 2019, since the passage of Local Law 97. You're required to list any decarbonization or energy efficiency measures that have been implemented and show the emissions and energy reduction achieved. So we want to see that what that emissions reduction percentage changes from 2019 until calendar year 2024. Next, we went, and that's the same documentation, in future years. The next category is documenting the current 97 compliance status. So that's related to the emission limit, the unadjusted emission limit. We want to know how much, we want to know what that emission limit is, both for this reporting cycle and for the next reporting cycle starting in 2030. And we also want to know the emissions attributed to the building and the external constraint. So showing us that breakdown of the annual, of the current emissions of the building and how that relates to those emission limits. That would be the same, regardless of the year that you apply for this adjustment. Next slide, please. Then you'll need to document your current building systems. For 2025, in this year, you can either list all of, you can do kind of like an audit light where you're listing all of the major base building and any tenant equipment, and we don't want to know what fuel that equipment is operating on. Or if you've had a local LL87 report within the last 4 years, that's acceptable in lieu of the list of the item 1 shown on the screen. Another acceptable item would be if you've done any sort of incentive program that's required an energy audit or a decarbonization plan, such as through NYSERDA's FlexTech or any other program, that could be acceptable. And if you have applied for a 320.7 adjustment application, the documents that you've prepared for that adjustment application could also be used for documenting, for this particular supporting documentation requirement. Starting next year, the documentation, more is in line with what's required for a good faith effort decarbonization plan. We would still accept, a FlexTech application or 320.8 documentation, but we also want to, and probably even a local LL87 report, but we want to know the list of all of the building equipment, not just the major equipment, including the date of installation, and whether the equipment serves multiple buildings if it's part of a shared, energy system or campus. And then we want to know the energy end use breakdown, for each one of the end uses, such as lighting, heating, cooling, plug loads, etc. So that's documenting your current building systems. And then next slide, please. And then we want to part of the finalizing the decarb plan, documenting your plan for decarbonization. The rule says to the maximum extent possible. So this year, we want you to identify decarbonization measures that can be implemented, and whether they and also measures that maybe have been considered that cannot be feasibly implemented, and why that is the case. This year we're looking at just describing what those measures are, and just putting those down on paper for a plan. If you've done a 320.8 application, you've already completed this step as well, so that documentation can be reused for this. Now, starting next year, we need you to take those decarbonization measures a step further, and for each one of those measures that you've identified, estimate the carbon and energy savings, the anticipated cost, and installation date of when that would occur. So that's the description of what the decarbonization plan is for this external constraint. Next slide, please. Beth had touched on this already, but this is just kind of a checklist when you are filling out the submission, the ticket in BEAM that Julie is going to show you what that looks like. These are all the documents and things that you need to make sure that you have before you submit that ticket. So you have to confirm that the building was in existence prior to the passage of 97. This is just the checkbox in BEAM. You have to have already submitted your local I-97 annual emissions report. So you must, first complete that step, and then you can apply for this adjustment. You must also upload the signed New York City Accelerator APA form. That needs to be an upload in BEAM. that will be discussed later in this presentation. You must have also purchased offsets up to 10% of the building emissions limit, and just note that this is the unadjusted limit. So in our previous example, this would be 10% of the 150 tons of carbon. So it would be 15 tons that you would have to purchase offsets if that was the, if that was your building. Then you need to propose your adjusted limit, like that example that we showed. Describe your technical explanation, and that includes uploading all of your supporting documentation for your decarb plan, and then have your RDP attestation, and that needs to be signed by the RDP and the building owner. Just note, because Beth's going to go through the financial constraints adjustment, this particular adjustment is only available for Article 320. It is not available for Article 321. It's not available for Article 321 buildings that are pursuing 2030 pathway. It's just specifically for Article 320. Next slide, please. And I think now I'm passing it back over to Beth.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, great. So again, these are the high-level steps for demonstrating eligibility for a 320.7 adjustment. And now we'll look at the financial constraint opportunities, which would show the building meets a financial metric or the building is on the tax lien sale list. Okay, next slide. So these financial metrics are in the rule, that's 103-12. I'll go through them now. And there are also templates available on DOB's website. So those are the template that a CPA completes to show that the building meets this metric, and that completed template is submitted in the adjustment application. So for buildings that are a condo or a co-op, this metric is that the building shows that for the most recent prior 3 years, the increase in the average increase over those 3 years in annual carrying charges is 5% or more above the average rate of inflation for that same 3-year period. For buildings that are owned by a nonprofit, specifically pursuant to the sections that are identified here, and this is from the law, those buildings have to show that for 2 years in a row, revenue was less than expenses. Expenses outpaced revenue. For buildings that are in a affordable housing regulatory agreement or buildings with no debt, those buildings have to show they meet an income expense ratio that is less than 1.05. And again, there are templates available on DOB's website for how these calculations are determined. And then for all other buildings, a building has to show that it meets a debt service coverage ratio of less than 1.15. Okay, next slide. So this is a sample shot of what the templates look like. This is the debt service coverage ratio template, which applies to any building that doesn't meet one of the other buckets. And in the bottom left corner, you'll see a link to all 4 of the financial metric templates. And so this is the fillable form that a CPA completes and a building owner can submit in their 320.7 adjustment application. Okay, next slide. So for a 320.7 adjustment for financial constraints, an Article 320 building has to show the building was in existence prior to the passage of the law, prior to November 15th, 2019. The annual emissions report has been submitted for that year. The Accelerator Adjustment Program attestation form completed and signed. The building has purchased the maximum amount of offsets and recs. However, recs that are eligible for Local N97 aren't currently available. So this isn't required until recs are available. Then there is an attestation form for CPAs to complete to say that as a licensed professional, they verify the information that's in the financial metric template. And additionally, there's the template that we looked at on the last slide that shows that the building's financials do meet that standard. All of those materials have to be provided for an Article 320 building. For an Article 321 building, those buildings only have to provide the accelerator adjustment program attestation form, the CPA attestation form saying that the licensed professional completes and attests to the information in the financial metric template, and the financial metric template, which includes demonstrating that the building does qualify for the adjustment. And then in either an Article 320 or an Article 321 building, if the building is on the tax lien sale list, they only need to show that they are indeed on the tax lien sale list. And if we could go to the next slide. So the tax lien sale list gets published and updated throughout the first half of the year. And the building has to be on the last tax lien sale list of that year. So currently, the list that's up is as of March 17th. A building needs to show it's on the May 20th list this year. And so that would apply each year. It has to be on the last list of the year. Okay, next slide. Okay, great. I'm going to pass it over to Julia, who will take us through the steps for completing this process.
Great, thank you, Beth. So as Beth mentioned earlier, this is a multi-step process to apply for 320.7 adjustments. So your first step is going to be to go into DOB Now and pay your filing fee, and then your next step will be to go into the BEAM reporting portal to apply for that adjustment. So we're going to talk about filing your DOB Now filing fee for external constraints and also for financial constraints. So the owner and the owner's representative and the service provider email address have to be provided during the DOB Now filing fee process. And those three emails are going to be the only way to access your building profile in BEAM. So you might be able to make a BEAM account without submitting that filing fee, but your applicable building information won't be present in your building profile. So you're going to have to then make your BEAM account using one of those three emails that you've entered into DOB Now to pay your filing fee. The email addresses that you've entered in DOB Now will be the only email addresses to view the profile in BEAM. Again, so the owner, the owner's representative, or the service provider. And you don't worry though, you'll be able to add in more contacts in BEAM beyond those three once you get access to the BEAM reporting portal. And then just something to remember that the DOB Now filing fee payment information is going to be transferred over to BEAM on a nightly basis. So you'll be able to pay your filing fee one day, and then at minimum, you'll be able to get into BEAM the next day. And that process may take a little bit longer depending on the payment type that you use. Okay, so you go to the DOB Now login page, you will enter your NYC ID email address and select login. If you have to make an NYC ID account, you'll choose create account, or you can use our DOB Now user guide. We've got a really nice one with step-by-step instructions on the website. After you've logged into DOB Now, you'll see the welcome page. You'll hover over DOB Now Safety. You'll click Energy. And then from the Energy submenu, you'll select Local Law 97/88 filing fee payments. And don't worry, you don't need to remember all of this. On the right-hand side, in that toolbar, you'll see this whole presentation as a handout. So you could just follow along, and you'll always have this information later. Okay, so once you're in, you'll choose local law payment. You'll have the local law payments dashboard. You'll select plus local law 97 payment. In the stakeholders section, you'll select your role, the owner or the owner's representative, and the information of that logged in user will auto-populate in the selected area, and the owner information is required. If you want to change the name or address, you'll select Manage Associate Licenses from that little person icon at the top right corner of the screen. If the logged in user is an owner's representative, you'll enter the email address associated with the NYC ID account of the owner on the Owner Information tab. And again, those grayed out fields will auto-populate from the DOB Now profile associated with the NYC ID account. And then just something again to remember, to submit your compliance report in BEAM or apply for the 320.7 adjustment, you'll first pay your filing fee, then create account in BEAM, again, using one of those 3 email addresses, either for owner's representative, or service provider, the RDP, RCX agent, and then only those 3 email addresses will allow you to access your building's profile in BEAM. Again, you'll be able to add more once you're in BEAM, but you must add all those 3 email addresses in DOB Now, and you can do that by clicking either owner information or the owner's representative tabs. Okay, now for fee exempt owner types, you're still going to go through this process in DOB Now to get your payment confirmation number, though you may be fee exempt. So you won't be paying anything, but you're still going to need that payment confirmation number. So the following owner types are fee exempt: buildings owned by a not-for-profit corporation that is used exclusively for educational, charitable, and/or religious purposes, and buildings owned by a federal, state, city, or foreign government. So again, fee exempt owners are exempt from payment, but you still have to go through these steps to get the payment confirmation number that you'll take over to BEAM and enter into the DOB reporting portal. If you are a fee exempt owner type, you can get proof of that at the Department of Finance's website, and it must indicate that the tentative or final assessment roll value is 0. On Department of Finance's website, you can print proof of that exemption and then upload that into the BEAM reporting portal. So 320.7 adjustment filings fee can be either for 320 or 321. So indicate as is appropriate for your building. You'll select no when asked whether you will be filing a compliance report in the local Law 97 reporting portal. You'll select no when asked if you are submitting a 120-day extension request to file a compliance report in the local Law 97 portal, even though you may be doing those reports or those requests in the future, you're going to select yes here. So then you'll select yes when you're asked whether you'll be filing an Article 320.7 adjustment application in the local Law 97 reporting portal. Then in the property information, you will enter your borough block and lot and click search and add. And again, you can always access this information in the handouts section of the presentation, and then it'll also be online on ASHRAE's website and on DOB's website. So don't think you have to remember every single thing. Okay, then the building identification number is going to pop up. You'll check the boxes associated with the bin or bins for your payment and choose select and add. Then you'll select the appropriate 320-point adjustments filing fee type for your building, external constraint, or Section C3, the financial constraint for the financial metric, or C4 financial constraint if you are on the Department of Finance tax lien sale list. So you'll select the one that's appropriate for you. Okay. And then you'll proceed to pay button will display. You'll choose the, you'll be seeing that appropriate fee for the adjustment type that you chose, and you'll choose pay now. Okay, so you've submitted your payment in CityPay. You'll receive a receipt number with receipt details. This is not the payment confirmation number that you want. You'll return to the DOB Now window. If you've paid by credit card, PayPal, or Venmo, you'll see a notification with your payment confirmation number. And this is the number that you should want to keep for later for the BEAM reporting portal. And you'll also be sent this by email. Now, if you have paid by e-check, this process may take a little bit longer. The status of the transaction will change to pending payment verification, and then that all-important payment confirmation number will be sent by email when the payment clears. This can take up to 10 business days after you've submitted in DOB Now. And your data will not be logged into BEAM, so you won't see that in BEAM until the payment clears. The status on DOB Now no longer says pending, and you have that payment confirmation number. So you'll need all those things if you've paid by e-check in order to see your building's information in the BEAM reporting portal. Okay. So now, okay, you've got your payment confirmation number that you got in DOB Now by paying your filing fee. Now you're going to take that over to the BEAM reporting portal, and you can apply for your 320.7 adjustment for external constraint or financial constraint. Okay, so you're in BEAM. On the left-hand side, you'll navigate to the help desk. You'll choose New Ticket. And then you'll select the number 10 ticket, which is Local Law 97 application for 320.7 adjustment, Article 320 and Article 321. So you can use this ticket to apply for 320.7 for 320 or for Article 321 buildings. So you've selected that ticket number 10, the 320.7 adjustment ticket. You'll need for this ticket your building address, borough block and lot, building identification number. You'll have to upload your supporting documentation. You'll need confirmation of a registered design professional, attestation, and upload of attestation documentation. And then again, you'll need that payment confirmation number. Okay, so you'll enter on the 320.7 adjustment ticket. You'll enter your building address as it appears on DOB's BIS system. You'll enter the borough block and lot, the BBL, as it appears on the Local 97 covered buildings list. The BBL must be 10 numerical digits, so no leading zeros, no dashes, no spaces, no commas, just 10 numerical digits. You'll also enter your building identification number, and that must be 7 numerical digits. Again, no spaces, no dashes, no letters, nothing like that. You'll then select Article 320 or 321 as it's appropriate for your building. Once you've made your choice, we're going to first look at Article 320. So if you've selected Article 320, then your options are external constraint, financial constraint, or inclusion on the Department of Finance's New York City tax lien sale list. So let's first look at if you've chosen external constraint. So earlier in the presentation, Emily went through all the documentation that you're going to need. Those requirements are repeated on the ticket. You'll also need the adjustment process attestation form signed by the New York City Accelerator. And then you'll also enter your proposed 320.7 adjusted limit that your RDP has provided for you. You will affirm that the building was in existence or a permit for construction issued prior to November 15th, 2019. You'll include, you'll attest that the building's emission report for the calendar year prior to submission of the application for an adjustment was submitted, and that the owner has purchased maximum allowable amount of greenhouse gas offsets. And that's just a checkbox on the ticket. Then for external constraint, you'll confirm that the report has been reviewed by a registered design professional, again with that checkbox. And then please, you'll enter the RDP's license number, and then you'll upload that attestation document by your RDP. Okay, so for Article 320, if you've chosen financial constraint, you'll have to upload supporting documentation, and you'll complete one of those financial constraint metric templates certified by a public accountant. And you will upload a completed 320.7 process attestation form, again signed by the accelerator. And then similarly as external constraint, for financial constraint, you'll affirm that the building was in existence or permit for construction issued before November 15th, 2019. You'll affirm that the building emissions report for the calendar year prior to the submission of the application for the adjustment was submitted. And you'll affirm that the owner has purchased the maximum allowable amount of greenhouse gas offsets. Okay, so if you are Article 320 and you've chosen inclusion on the Department of Finance's New York City tax lien sale list, you'll upload that documentation that you're in fact on that tax lien sale list. Okay, so those are the options if you are applying for the 320.7 adjustment for Article 320. If you are applying for Article 321, you'll select one of the two options, either financial constraint or inclusion on the Department of Finance's New York City tax lien sale list. Again, for financial constraint, you'll upload one of those financial constraint metric templates that we saw just a few slides back, and then also the adjustment process attestation form signed by the New York City Accelerator. And then same thing as for Article 321 with the Department of Finance tax lien sale list, you'll upload your documentation on that ticket within Beam. Okay, so once you've chosen, okay, which option, 320, or 321, which kind of constraint are we talking about, external, financial? Once you've filled out all that information in the documentation, you'll bring back that DOB Now payment confirmation number, and you'll enter that here in the ticket. And once you've done that, you can click Submit. Again, all this information is in the handout. It'll be on the website. These requirements for the documentation are also in Beam when you submit that ticket. So again, don't feel like you have to remember each of these steps. Okay, so this is our webinar schedule. Our next webinar is coming up on the 28th. and we're going to be talking about combined reporting. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us at beam_local law97@buildings.nyc.gov. And now I'm going to pass it over to the accelerator.
Thanks, Julia. I'm going to cover a little bit about what the accelerator does. Hopefully you all know that the New York City Accelerator is a free service established to help buildings decarbonize. So who's eligible to work with the accelerator? Any privately owned New York City buildings that are greater than 5,000 square feet, new or existing, can work with the accelerator. If a smaller building winds up getting referred to us, we refer them to partner organizations who specialize in buildings less than 5,000 square feet. It's very easy to get connected with us. Just give us a call. We connect you with a dedicated account manager who will provide objective advice on your buildings, customized to your specific needs. There's no cost, there's no commitment. You can tap into our services as much as or as little as you would like. Next slide. So the overview of the process, this is a very high level overview, but again, today you're learning a little bit about the program. We'll do a high level building needs assessment to understand what's happening in your building, the age and condition of the systems in your buildings. We'll look at any existing reports that may have been produced, audits that would indicate prioritization of projects that you should be considering. We'll help you decide on the projects, ECMs, energy conservation measures you should be considering. We'll help connect you with service providers and incentive programs to implement these measures, and as well as financing options to fill in that financing gap. And then we're just here to continue to provide support and service and make sure things don't get stuck, nudge things forward for you, and circle back if you have additional projects or questions for us. So we're always here to help you in this process. Next slide. So diving in a little bit on the external constraints support that we'll be providing. Let's move to the next slide. So the first step is to engage with us. As I mentioned, you'll be assigned to a dedicated account manager who will guide you through the 320.7 application process. We'll work together to do a building needs assessment. And as I mentioned, we'll review your estimated compliance status, looking at any available LL97 audited decarbonization plans, recommend the potential energy conservation measures or decarbonization projects that you may want to consider to aid in achieving compliance. We'll then, identify all the available incentives and financing opportunities that are available to pursue those incentives, and we'll connect you with an array of service providers that you could connect with to do the work. And then the next step would be to verify the qualifying circumstances for the 320 adjustment, where the owners will work with us and a registered design professional to complete the appropriate documentation that's been reviewed earlier in the presentation. Next slide. So this is a very small but representation of the building assessment process that we cover. As you can see, it covers the different building systems, the subsystems, and we try to capture the full picture of what's happening in that building to make suggestions, recommendations, and to help you prioritize your approach to getting projects done. Next slide. So the step 3 for the 320 adjustment process is to obtain an adjustment process attestation. We're calling this an APA form from our team or from the account manager that you're working with. And this will reflect your engagement with the accelerator as outlined in steps 1 and 2. If applying for an external, for an adjustment due to external constraints, you'll complete the APA form, and it requires engagement in steps 1 and 2, working with your account manager. The owner will sign the APA form, verifying that they're engaged in steps 1 and 2, and send the form to the account manager. The account manager will verify that the owner has engaged and that the relevant incentives have been identified and pursued, and returns the APA form to the owner, confirming that the information is accurate and alerting the owner that issues. Next slide. And again, this is a sample of the APA form. We have 2 different forms, one that is tailored to multifamily and one that is available to the commercial and industrial type programs. Next slide. And at this time, I will turn it over to Ann Pence, who will cover the financial constraints process and support provided to the accelerator.
Thank you, Lisa. So I'm going to walk through the steps to go that the New York City Accelerator can provide assistance to you, application assistance for the 320.7 adjustment for financial constraints. Lisa went through the external constraints. They're similar, but also there's some differences. So there's 4 steps to demonstrate the eligibility for the adjustment for financial constraints. And the first step, I think you can go to the next slide, please. So the first step, again, similarly to the external constraint and our assistance with you, is to just engage with the New York City Accelerator. You would contact us and you would get assigned an account manager that would help guide you through this process. The second step would be to verify the qualifying circumstance that to meet the 320.7 adjustment for financial constraints. And what this includes is that you would work with your CPA accountant to perform the relevant metric tests that were discussed earlier by DOB, and they're also described in section 4 of the 320.7 adjustment guide. And the other part of this step is that the accelerator would verify that the owner has engaged with us, and together that we've identified the appropriate energy conservation measures, the incentives, the financing programs, and contractors, and we've confirmed that we've been working together with you. You can go to the next slide. So, and step 3 is again also this the APA, the adjustment process attestation form. This would be the step would be to complete that form. It would, again, the accelerator will help the owner, and together with the accelerator, the owner, we would complete this together. The owner would sign the APA, stating that they've engaged with the accelerator and have gone through the first 2 steps, they would then send the APA to us, to their account manager at the accelerator. And then the account manager would also verify that the APA is in fact correct, that the owner has engaged with the accelerator, and that we have worked together to identify the ECMs, the financing options, incentives and contractor assistance. And then the account manager would sign this form. They would confirm and raise any issues if there were any issues that weren't correct, and send the form back to the owner. And you can go to the next slide. And then the final step would be that the owner or their representative would submit the application with the APA form to the DOB using the reporting platform that's been described. And this is just a way to contact the accelerator. If any of you are not familiar with us, you can reach out to us this way, either by through our website, email, or phone.
Thank you, Andrew. And I just wanted to quickly check in with our DOB team. Do we still want to do a brief Q&A, or are we good for today and we will include those questions in the FAQ that will be shared?
Yeah, I think we'll incorporate any questions we received today into our FAQ.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Luke.
Thank you so much. As I mentioned before, the presentation slides and video recordings will be available on ASHRAE's and DOB website. And we are also sharing a presentation evaluation link in the chat. So please take a few moments to fill it out. As always, we will leave the webinar open or active for another couple minutes so that everyone can copy the links or click them, or copy the contact email addresses. And just one last reminder that the next webinar is on this Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the DOB team will present on combined reports. So that's all for today. Thank you so much to our speakers today and to our attendants. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day.